What did we leave off on 2 weeks ago? Was it ethics or patience? So he had yet to talk about ethics.
We were already talking about ethics.
Mm.
Talk about now patience.
이제 수준 차단되는 것이 기아타마 되듯이.
오케이. 다 가리나면은 다 만도 친요래서야. 친요래서야 돼. 친요래서야 돼 가르잖아. 포지티브 스테이지야지 당연하다. 아니 네게티브 스테이지 아니지. 마 강추두. 마 빠자. 마 고야 되는 거야.
In any case, practicing the Dharma is about trying to develop positive states as much as possible and trying to reduce negative states as much as possible, trying to, so that you can get rid of them or abandon them, as we say. And this is the point, isn't it?
Yeah. Which one positive mind? Which one negative mind? That they were clear, unmistakable, understand the importance, isn't it? Therefore need study, is that?
But to do that study is important, because you have to know what states of mind are positive and what states of mind are negative. Right? You have to know this clearly.
Yeah.
You should know it well. Right? You have to know it without mistakes, and therefore you must study. Right?
Negative sejure. Duchar, Marusul Kanga Chevidu. Shamba? Positive sejure. Marusula ya deshi Chevidu.
For instance, we can talk about how anger is bad, how anger creates problems for us. And on the other side, we can talk about loving kindness, how it's good, and how it's something what we want and we need because it brings happiness.
Yeah.
I mean, so on a rough or general level, we can talk about these things. We have some understanding, right?
Negative in the means the desho means the desho
Of all the different negative states of mind, the easiest one to recognize as negative is anger, right? This is the easiest one to see that it's bad.
Oh yeah. That's yasho no ne karere desena ane shambad te yasho yima te ngando positive no ne means the desho de lewa.
Then, as for positive states of mind, the best is, you might say, loving kindness, right? It's easiest for us to recognize, how loving kindness is a positive state of mind.
Yeah?
Isn't that the case? I mean, we reckon that, I know what anger is. I know what loving kindness is. We think this, don't we?
Oh, really? Kuzho ane upset karsa. Li medeni cheva kareyare. Kuzho yene karele. Mipa karele. Ane shaba mipa mone karele. Nomba karele. Those cheva ina. Then ya. Tenso chile. Oh, te ita kuzho to bi shira. Ane shamba to bi shira me bitas.
But really, what is the difference between anger, or being angry, and being displeased, for instance? What is anger actually? For instance, what is the focus of anger? Or loving kindness? What does loving kindness focus upon? What is the subjective aspect or feeling that we associate with it? I mean, when we begin to look more closely, we begin to have a little bit more doubt. Oh, maybe I don't know these things so well. So we need to develop a wisdom that realizes anger, a wisdom that realizes loving kindness. what these things actually are.
Understand? 제발 제기. 손으로 다음이니까 생소질래 연구도나 실험했다.
If we begin to doubt our earlier conclusions when we analyze them, it's a sign that we haven't developed wisdom about that.
Understand? 근데 일단 어느 실하고.
So we need wisdom.
Therefore, 먼저 다리 다 로델이야. 이제 단투야. 이게 저 나는 내라고 좀 말해. 나 저로서 자반이나 내라고 좀 말해. 저로서가 찌지나 내라고 좀 연로 되나야. 저로서 내요.
We weren't able to give exams this year.
Thank you.
We weren't able to give exams this year, which makes it easier for Geshe. It makes it easier for me. Maybe it makes it easier for you guys too. But it actually, it's harmful. It's detrimental to you.
Okay? 근데 먼저 세모 할 거죠. 뭐래 전에 말을 좀 못해 대단한 거지. 못해 대단한 거지. 못해 야보지. 용알아. 뭐래 전에 단지 세유 정의 두두제대 너의 셴네. 아니 세유 정보도 말로서 권리셔야 된다. 세유 멤버도 봐지. 그것도 뭐 어떻다야 돼? 먼저 랭게를 되니? 먼저 못해 대도 되마. 근데 조심만 해내나요? 조심만 놀아야 되시요. 오늘에.
We do need to understand these things well and clearly. Because if we do, then our lives become more meaningful. We begin to lead very good lives. Once we can clearly recognize what a negative state of mind is, as opposed to a positive state, anger, loving kindness, and so forth, then we can really, not only lead meaningful lives and have good lives now, there's greater happiness now, but also in the future, whether you accept those or not.
Okay. 근데 이상한도 내가 에지에 깔려 잡아야 돼. 한 미비 콘도에 깔려 잡아야 돼. 한 제브나야. 강간 더 돼요. 먼저 뭐네 저서 같도 그러지 제트 바이나 먼저 이때 시즈만 돼안데 이거니마 아니 봐 센서 쉐주 특정 노사라 고하면 좀 내가서 잡는다. 내가 잡으러 버시죠. 이 바디 아니면이야 저 중국도 통해런지를 막 지도 통와 다른 미셔비 준비 아니 또녀고 안 봐. 근데 이제 명가 늘 것도 차단지 지는 도 사요. 회의다 아니 하다 보지.
This year, Eddie has worked quite hard. Miffy has also worked quite hard, and all of these teachings Geshe has given on Friday nights are on tape. They've all been recorded, and if you were able to really study these teachings well, you would gain some understanding of what's found in this text known as the foundation of all good qualities, from the first verse, which says that the foundation of all good qualities is a kind and venerable guru, all the way down to the verse that talks about how we will not achieve enlightenment without a clear recognition that we need to practice the three types of morality, not just develop the mind of enlightenment, etc. In this section, these verses, you'll find an explanation of the stages of the path that are shared with a person of small capacity, the stages of the path that are shared with a person of medium capacity, and some of the stages of the path of a person of great capacity, together with an explanation of the sevenfold instructions on cause and effect and how to develop the mind of enlightenment, equanimity, and so forth.
Understand?
Which makes all of this, what Geshe was speaking about, easier. Now, what is the main practice that we want to emphasize? To practice on a continual basis. Jambatan Niji Jembo. Loving kindness and compassion.
Understand? Seven Chuchi, seven Jichi said, Tesuda, Ani, Jimena, Jimashi to Teta. Sama, Nijichimo to Shambani, Yajita.
You can talk about these stages of the past. Share with the person of small and medium capacity. You can talk about developing the recognition all sentient beings have been your mother and recalling their kindness. You can talk about these sevenfold instructions on cause and effect, but really, what are you talking about? You're talking about techniques or methods that you can use to develop loving kindness and compassion.
Understand? Oh, 데이터 만든 요래 때와 뭐지 대체고. 아니 요래 때와 이제 이나 이제 가르라 고고 생체로 고고.
These are our main practices, what we need to be doing on a regular basis. If we're going to practice compassion, then, well, who do we direct this to? When we cultivate it in meditation, we direct towards other sentient beings, don't we? If you're cultivating compassion for sentient beings, then you must give up your ill will towards them, mustn't you? If you were to harm a sentient being, then you would be giving them suffering, making them suffer, right?
Understand? Oh, yeah. 아니 shamba go. 나도 shamba 년에 제거 거. shamba 년에 제거. 진짜야. 로파 제거. 편도 제거. 편도 제는 이제는 대시 거.
We also need to cultivate loving kindness. Practicing loving kindness is one of the things we emphasize as well. So you need to try and benefit sentient beings, right? Yeah, because by benefiting and helping others, you make them happy. That's it, right? It's like this, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it not like this?
How many 가제 계시잖아 마셔나. 봐서 진짜로 내서 뽕하다. 진짜로야. 편도체야. 네가 알래.
No matter how much you say, it all comes back to this. Huh? Giving up your ill will towards others and doing what you can to help them.
내가 들이 니세고 라요와 샴바 고나인다 니제 고나인다 너도나 뭐 랑기 니에쇼 랑도 니보이게 자타 드니 바고 드니 바비 세자 드니 잘하고 드니 세냐 단자라고 Don't forget.
That's it. When you're practicing loving kindness or compassion, then you follow a particular order, don't you? As Geshe explained. You start by cultivating it towards the people that you're close to, your family, your friends. And then you shift it to people who are neutral. And then your enemies, the people that you dislike. And then extend it towards all sentient beings. Yeah?
Okay.
Don't forget. If you cultivate loving kindness and compassion in this way, then you'll develop really pure, good forms of them. You must know what the main practice is. Otherwise, you end up listening to so many teachings, and in the end, you might not end up knowing what you're meant to be doing. You might not know what the main practice is. It's possible, isn't it?
Understand? Oh, hey. 나 근데 이랬어. 근데 이상 안도 안에 정바고 니지 거네. 제부 가르래. 하송고. 되니 너바니 대치 세세니. 만도 따발라요, 오게. 제대 되는지 너바도 대 조주 되는지 너바니 보텔레스. 만도 세대 조주 세대 노라래. 뭐지?
We cultivate loving kindness, then we cultivate compassion, then we develop this wholehearted resolve, and then work to develop the mind of enlightenment. Now, the mind of enlightenment is, as Geshe always says, a mind that has the two aspirations. The aspiration that's intent on others' welfare and the aspiration that's intent on enlightenment. Once we develop these two aspirations, our minds become minds of enlightenment. Don't they? That's how it happens.
Understand?
You don't need to buy the mind of enlightenment.
Okay?
Now, you don't need to purchase it. Just make sure you get develop the two aspirations, and your mind becomes a mind of enlightenment.
Okay?
One of these aspirations, the one that's intent on others' welfare, is loving kindness, compassion, the wholehearted resolve.
Okay? The bachi gares na teacher joju to do nyam. Joju tonde chinda ba. Sanje tonde chinda ba.
The other aspiration, the one that's intent on enlightenment, is the thought that I must achieve enlightenment. I must become a Buddha in order to achieve the first aim.
Okay? What that say? That's he can't. Any can't you got it. So you share that's it, Sarah. Come back to Niger, show you to say, that's Sarah. Huh? Is Lale Majita, they are Sampegor, the Inayo, Anichi, Jiminole, Studiole, there is Zevinole, Ani Soteginole, Sendiginole, Soteginole, Shiraginole, and you so true in your letter.
In addition to that, we then need to engage in certain deeds. We're talking about a mind, the mind of enlightenment. And also then certain states of mind, like loving kindness, compassion, the wholehearted resolve, and so forth, like this, right? And although we need to develop these further and further, that's not all. In addition to that, we need to engage in certain deeds, like the practices of generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, meditative stabilization, and wisdom. We need to engage in the 6 deeds.
Understand?
Right? These are also known as the 6 perfections. And we talked about the practice of generosity, didn't we?
Okay.
With the practice of generosity, you ought to also have the practice of loving kindness as well. You cultivate loving kindness in your mind, and then you practice generosity towards other sentient beings. You work to benefit sentient beings, which is what Geshe was just talking about, right? These two must come together. You need to work on developing both of them.
Understand?
Why do you need to practice generosity? Because you need to benefit others. Because you need to help others.
Understand? Oh,
why do you need to help others? Well, because I'm cultivating loving kindness. Because I need to improve and develop my loving kindness.
Okay?
So is the only reason that you're practicing generosity to benefit others? Well, not necessarily. It doesn't have to be. All the happinesses, whether it happens in this lifetime or future lifetimes, arise in dependence upon resources. And resources are the fruits or effects of generosity. So we need resources and so we need to practice generosity.
Yeah?
The glorious Chandakirti said this.
Understand?
The practice of generosity directly benefits others, but as a byproduct ends up helping us out too. We end up achieving our own aims, as incidentally.
Understand? So you simply randed the Tankabala. Yellow is penny, Rana should pay you. Amazing.
Bodhisattvas are so skilled at achieving their own welfare. They directly benefit others, and as a byproduct end up benefiting themselves.
Okay?
It's amazing the way that they achieve their own welfare. Look at the way we try to achieve our own welfare, right? Yeah? we become quite self-centered and work really hard and in an attempt to achieve our own welfare, end up encountering all sorts of problems and difficulties, right? So through self-cherishing, right? Doesn't really work.
Understand? Mano, Ye Yawa on the Rachi Bazune, Rangi Tedrubaina. Then it do it. Cannot tell you.
Whereas, if we were to cherish others, then we end up achieving our own welfare in a really perfect and good way, right? Alternatively, you could be indifferent to the welfare of others and try to achieve your own welfare, right? But you have also you don't end up achieving your own welfare in the end anyway, and other people don't like you. You have all sorts of difficulties, so it doesn't work like that.
Understand?
That's the practice of generosity. Geshe already explained it. It's on the tapes. If you need it, talk to Eddie. Say, hey Eddie, give me a tape. The second one is ethics, the practice of ethics.
Yeah.
The precious Lord Lama Tsongkhapa says that ethics is an attitude of abstention. That's the term that he uses, the attitude of abstention. But it's also referred to as a guarding attitude, or the intention to guard, even. So two different ways of phrasing it, but they mean the same thing.
Okay.
This attitude of abstention refers to abstaining from certain things. So abstaining or giving up ill will towards others, towards sentient beings. Giving up the harm you do to them.
Understand?
We need to give up our ill will towards others. We need to abstain from it because we're practicing compassion. You can give the same type of reasoning as before.
Understand? Compassion,
if you cultivate compassion but are still harming others, I mean, your compassion is completely false, isn't it?
This is not really compassion, isn't it? Understand? Oh, hey. Suchum said. Ninja Yajitaya. Sincelia Netapon. Roa. Sincelia. Like a Karchanaya. Sincelia Neduga Munduga. Say soon. Soon Sabalana. Sincelia. Jella Net Rogaduga Munduga. Never Rogaduga Munduga. Soon. Say soon. Nesele Munduga Munduga. Roa. Honor. Ponsesana. And Nesapomp. Roa.
In practicing ethics, then, we're trying to develop our compassion and to give up our ill will towards sentient beings. We must guard our mind. Because this is the other way we can look at ethics, right? In terms of the intention to guard. To guard our minds from or against ill will. To watch the mind, to see if the mind is moving in a negative direction or not. Right? So here you have the ethics, helping you to develop compassion by guarding the mind against ill will, or, if you prefer, abandoning the mind of ill will, abandoning the ill will. So, guarding and abstaining.
Understand? Oh, hey. That tangi te do chipare. Ona? Choro tsu tsu ya te. Sinchele nese pamba. Sinchele te chipore. Choro te la kain reya ya marbe san. Shol reya ya. Roa. Sinchele ya nese pamba ina. Di ongi. Ani rala ya deshi yungu ya. Sejuma ne meba. Roa. La sopata. Ani dala sobe masebu chiki. Ani balsa guru ta. Be pe hal leba mabusu ya ta. Roa domba. Nishe damba se. Nishe damba se. Do duna manzo chi balsa guru. Oya. Sinchele nese de. 아니 두슈 말소 아니 네게티브 세주래 Kuzho said,
Ore.
Kuzho necessarily Jiba.
Ore.
Then there is a Dino Maruto Dinola Dumachariare, and Shoshamala Dumacharia. Then there is a round Dumari, Royal Cotton. Duma just go. It's a shoulder.
Someone might ask you, is when you practice ethics, is the only thing you're doing giving up ill will towards others? I mean, is that all, that you end up not harming others? Is it that, do you not yourself, are your own aims not at all achieved in any way? Of course your aims are. As a byproduct of our practice of ethics, and we're happier, we have longer lives, we have fewer illnesses. In fact, of all the different negative states of mind we can think of, ill will is the worst of them. And ill will and anger are quite the same. So that by giving up ill will, we actually come closer to freeing ourselves from suffering. Because ill will lies at the cause of so much suffering. So that in practicing ethics, we not only end up, creating less, harming others less, but we also end up achieving our own welfare in a great way, incidentally, through having given up this cause of suffering.
Understand?
The worst cause of suffering is ill will. The ill will arises and we act upon that with our body, with our speech, and end up harming others. So we create the causes for suffering. So we must give this up or abandon that.
Understand?
You don't need to wait for a future life to see the suffering that you create in harming another person. Do you? Try it out. You hurt someone, you kill them or do something to them, and you end up having to stay in prison for a long time. Right? You don't have to wait for another life to see the suffering and the bad things that come from that.
Yeah. Understand? Oh, I think
So develop compassion for others. Give up your ill will. These two are connected to one another, aren't they? Can you see how they fit together?
Okay?
They're connected to the practice of ethics, so practice ethics. And when we practice ethics, we're happier. The effect of ethics is happiness. The effect of ill will is suffering.
Oh, understand?
There are many reasons for that. And to support this idea, Geshe wouldn't just say, because the Buddha said so. Right? Geshe is not going to say, this is true because the Buddha said so. Which is why we really need to study Buddhism. Why we need to have a more deep study of Buddhism. Because without that deep study, then we cannot follow all of the different reasons and all the logic that goes into supporting this idea. We won't understand it clearly without that. And this is why, because there's so many reasons, so much logic to support the idea that these good things come from one and bad things from the other, that we need to study so that we can understand it better.
Okay? Today is jibi nyola chayate, senchelia, pento chayata, suchuki nyola chayate, senchelia, nesepoya, senchelia, anichi, dunga chayata, tashi. That's it. They invite them to say what happened to us. They, somebody needs you, nyola tata never let him do.
The practice of generosity ends up, it involves helping others. The practice of ethics involves giving up our ill will towards them. Now, so can you see how that in these two practices you have a very close relationship with loving kindness and compassion?
Understand? Oh, do it. Oh, did you use it on this? In region. That did you super? Then it's such a general that. Shara, Takazima Kalshe and Mishi. Centralia, Doduna, Tumkata Javaina, the Kasa.
You don't be something.
Only Gavachidi Roa, only sent it to Jersey. That meet out.
It doesn't look like we're going to have time to go into ethics in much greater detail. But if we were to give a list of the different types of ethics there are, you've got the ethics of refraining from faulty behavior, the ethics of gathering virtue, and the ethics of working for the benefit of sentient beings.
That's easy. You should don't be such a sad. You should essentially unnecessary pomba. That's all. You should don't be such a. You essentially unnecessary pomba. You should don't be such a sad. You have to essentially this is majority dead. There was dead. You should don't be such a regular. You should don't be such a sad. You time is good. Essentially unnecessary. So chegme, majima legme, lue chegme, or those chayate, kele chayate. Then you should don't be such a.
It's easy. For instance, the ethics of refraining from faulty behavior is, for instance, thinking that I am going to give up my ill will towards sentient beings, right? So I am going to give up for, killing and so forth. It's not just sitting there simply not harming others, but rather it's you're thinking that from now on I'm going to give up my ill will towards others. I am not going to kill, I am not going to steal, I'm not going to engage in these different acts. Yeah?
Oh.
So the ethics of refraining from faulty conduct or behavior. Of course, it's good to refrain from killing and stealing and ill will towards others and so forth. Geshe doesn't mean to say that's not good. It is, but it's not, a vow. At that point, he said ethics. I don't know what connotations this word has in English. What it sort of implies. Where it kind of leads, the listener to think. But ethics is understood, at least in this context, should be understood as a commitment, a promise, in a sense, a vow that I'm not going to engage, kill, steal, develop ill will, and so forth.
Isn't it? Or to say, or to say, they are. Tarazi, Sijalia, Nita Pangi, Jessica, Since Kanga, Mando, the Geneva doing on it, then that you get to Shamba go to Jesse, Jealousy, and listen, this is Zuma, so
So you have ethics. And giving up ill will towards sentient beings. And there are reasons for this, as are outlined in this sevenfold instructions on cause and effect, where you go through these different things like loving kindness and compassion and so forth. Going over the reasons why, you ought to give this up and so forth.
Okay? God to say the body did just say that. Doduna, such a subject than Sanji Kombo He said, only you wanted to do there, but Lucy the picture, only give us to do now. There, Noji also calendar which I said, Jinder, Anchi means Nolan Digi, so no time, Roa, such a subject tender. And there, journey, the Jinder, and Nolechi Adela, Yochi that's another.
Next, you have the ethics of gathering virtue, which would be, you're performing virtue motivated by this mind with two aspirations. Right? You've got the aspiration to achieve Buddhahood so that you can alleviate the suffering of sentient beings. Right? So, motivated by the mind of enlightenment, you think that I'm going to do this virtue or that virtue. This would be these would be included within the ethics of gathering virtue. So in this case, then you might think, for instance, you continually cultivate this type of intention or motivation, and that you are committed to doing this practice or that practice, engaging in this virtue or that virtue. The practice of gathering, or the ethics of gathering virtue. You could also say that practicing generosity or giving up ill will, so that you may achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings, are instances of the ethics that work for the benefit of sentient beings. So it could also be explained like that. Of the different types of ethics, the most important is the first, this ethics of refraining from faulty behavior. Okay? That's the main one.
Okay.
Thirdly, we have the practice of patience. Patience. Patience is related to both loving kindness and compassion. Now, both loving kindness and compassion. Why might that be? Well, let's say that another person acts harmfully towards you, but you do not respond with ill will. That's patience. Right? Another person harms you, but you do not respond with ill will. So, patience.
Understand?
Patient, impatient. Does this work in English? Impatience is related to anger. So that another person tries to harm you, you are impatient with that, and you think to get revenge, you think to retaliate. Yeah, impatience is related to anger.
Understand?
In which case, you've lost your loving kindness and your compassion towards that person, haven't you? Right? When you think, or when you develop the wish to harm another person as a revenge or retaliation, you've lost your loving kindness and compassion for them.
Yeah?
Control. Therefore, it's therefore it's utterly clear that anger or impatience is a major obstacle to the practices of both loving kindness and compassion. You can say anger, or you can say impatience. The glorious Chandakirti uses these terms almost interchangeably in his text, Introduction to the Middle Way. Control.
Understand? That's two solutions. Zeva said, Jim Butcher, Shamba the Niji Godi, Tambo, and Niela go. Did you Kasa?
Permission.
Did you Jala go? Did you understand Jala go? Shamba Niji Nika, and the Soya.
As we were discussing earlier, Lama Tsongkhapa encourages us to focus first on the people we're close to, then on neutral persons, then on our enemies, and finally towards all sentient beings when meditating on loving kindness and compassion, right? This is the order we follow in both loving kindness and compassion, correct?
Okay. Then you Jana. Zevi knowledge. Nelia, Zevi knowledge.
Okay.
I need to need Pamisenche. The name, I need Jala. Zaba. Jala Zabate?
Tamuniel.
Or Tomuniel Zabo. Carle Sena, Mando, Kuzho Yina, just to die in Machad.
Following that same logic, when we cultivate patience, and we should start with the people that we're close to, and then extend it towards the people who are neutral, and then towards our enemies, and finally towards all sentient beings. After all, the people we get angry at aren't necessarily our enemies, are they? Now, this order was not taught in Scripture, in the text. As Geshe thinks that we can apply the same logic.
Understand?
You need to start by cultivating patience to the people you're close to, right? Is this necessary or not?
Oh, then you're just such a dead one.
This is the most problematic, isn't it? Some people are known to the outside world as very good people, everyone, he's such a nice guy, really seems like a good person, this and that, but once they get home, they're fighting with their kids, they're fighting with their family, outside everyone knows them as very good, but inside they're fighting, once you get into the family or in the house, they're fighting with everybody.
Kaya mare, numu to tapan jigwa. Numu to tapan jigwa ita, hela zeva gogu ya mare. Jigimundu, lanju kondo dezoyu. Then jigimundu.
So when you don't get what you want, that's how you respond, in this negative way. On the one hand, you can't really blame a person because after all, you're always with your family, right? Spend so much time with your family, so you don't cultivate patience for them, but that's not right, actually. It's not acceptable. You spend so much time with them, doesn't mean that you shouldn't cultivate patience for them. You need patience.
Understand?
So this is patience. This is a new topic for today. So maybe we should try and get it, to give you some idea of what patience actually is. Well, patience is to not develop ill will towards somebody when they do something that you do not want or do not like. Right? That's patience. Not developing the ill will when something like that happens.
Understand? Zeva go, Zeva go give you just there the carrier, Mando Noja Jidega, Nole, Shabbat, Nijita, just tell you, Sena, then you watch it there, and Kuzho Teresa, Data, Zevinolete, a catch shoot, Roa, 전번이제 연락 제발라 제비 연락 맨 타네 봐 제비 연락 제기 이제 소치 대이스
What is the reason that we practice patience? Well, what if we were to say because we're practicing loving kindness and compassion? After all, the thing that's most incompatible with a loving kindness and compassion is anger, isn't it? So without patience, there's no way we can get by or get around the anger. So we say that we must practice patience because we practice loving kindness and compassion. And anger is the greatest obstacle to loving kindness and compassion. We must have patience. Because there's no way we can overcome our anger without patience.
Okay. That's 맞지. 도스체. that's 대야야. 자바텔이야. 내절을 주문 줍니다. 누가 돈을 주자가. 아니, 지랑이 봤으니 자바세니. 자바 숨이요.
There are three types of patience. There's the patience that how is this translated in Lama and Chenmo? That doesn't pay heed to harmdoers? Anyone? Tenzi, you remember? No? Okay, anyway, that'll do, right? It's right up there, actually, just behind John. Yes, the patience. I mean, it's an accurate translation. It just might not be exactly what the text says. So the patience that doesn't think to harm doers. Let's say the patience that accepts suffering, and the patience that's intent on the Dharma. Earlier, Geshe was explaining patience as this not developing ill will towards somebody, not thinking of revenge or retaliation, right? That when Geshe was giving that explanation, he was emphasizing the first type of patience, the patience of not thinking to harm doers, not paying them heed.
Okay. 제비뇽의 제급이 진짜 때와 가르래. 제비뇽의 제급이 진짜 가르래 했잖아. 남비치기 나네. 렌제 그게 시작이지. 개인 잡아 대화. 무게인 잡아 두마레 했으라고요. 근데 이나스 난도 개와 주고요. 난도 개와 간투도지. 소소소시 체줄 맞지 개와지 저대로요. 그러와 지비뇽의 지비뇽의 단다까지 샤와나지. 근데 그 아니 제비뇽을 써봐. 개와지 저대로요. 근데 개와 주바스도 쿠치기 jamdo요. 대리자 개와수고요. 난도.
What is the main reason that we must practice patience? Well, look at it in this way. The Buddhist scriptures say that the result of virtue is happiness, and the result of non-virtue is suffering. And we're all accomplishing some virtue. I mean, maybe there's a difference, some small, some great. Yeah? But we all are accomplishing virtue of some type, right? Whether it's through the practice of generosity, or ethics, or patience. So we accomplish virtue, but anger destroys that virtue. It destroys its ability to produce certain effects. That's one of the worst parts about it. One of the worst aspects, you might say.
Understand? Marusu nyamo noni. Marusu dusho kuntrongin resoe songo yare tata de. Chamba nije nyole chawara pateje ya sootje. Mazepi sosu jije. Ani gewa chembe yopa de. Never zonge tewade. Ani danda dikansa kuntrore.
Thus we need patience to prevent that from happening, right? I mean, which is also one of the reasons why anger is so bad, why it is the worst of these different negative states of mind. I mean, we think that, but it's also true. Anger is the greatest obstacle to developing loving kindness and compassion, and anger destroys what little virtue we're able to muster up, what little virtue we're able to accomplish. So it is the worst of the negative states.
Understand? Could you get that kind of joy? Could you get the job to carry the us? Marusu Pena Chi Sechelia Kulu Zambitoni, Roa, Kulu Zumbitoni, Sechelia, Jimbadabota, and Kulu Zumbitoni, Sechelia, Nesenda Pandi, Roa, Chi, Sechelia, Pentoda, Sechelia, Nesenda Pond, or Tindi Chejani. Honey, zabandabu zebinyolendabu che dus cheni dus chedi kulu zambi toni dus cheni di nipa sabe gewa ani sabe gewi sabeji senge turjayo di sabe diga 제가 주마 가는 데에 온 거잖아. 너무 대화진데. 너무 대화지.
How is it that anger destroys the roots of virtue? We have to give this some thought. We accomplish virtue through, for instance, developing a positive motivation and then practicing generosity. Or with a positive motivation, giving up ill will and practicing ethics. Right? This is all an achievement of virtue, isn't it? So we get these roots of virtue in this way. And when we when we act with the positive motivation, that places a seed in the form of a potential within our minds. So this seed has the potential to produce a positive fruition. Yeah? Has the potential to become a positive or pleasant, we should say, fruition. So anger renders the seed left by that virtue incapable of producing a pleasant effect.
Understand?
That's why we say that anger destroys the roots of virtue. Right? That's what it means. When you say that the anger destroys the roots of virtue, you're saying that it renders the seeds of virtue incapable of producing a pleasant effect. And this is why anger is so bad.
Understand?
In a similar vein, we talk about how confession purifies negativities, right? When we talk about confessing with the four opponent powers.
Yeah?
Person develops a bad motivation and then kills or steals or commits sexual misconduct or some other thing. And those actions then place the seed of a non-virtue within their mind. And that seed of the non-virtue later produce an unpleasant effect, an effect of suffering.
Understand? That tells us you must do it. You must do it. That's also sinjamba that the nimi hakoba cheni.
Or
the nipa hakoba cheni. The duchayimba shiba cheni. Tashi cheni to the machine dose cheni. And the nyambo. That Karinaya, Achi, Kasaguru, Tuni Gomala Sobada, somebody Nijo Gomala Sobala Sobada, the Niabo, Digalia, and Chanduche, Niamoto, Jesse. Did you so you go in Chadu Chabaina? Indeed, so Chabado, Majima Lembi, Saviti in Java, do not in Germany. Then you keep out, couldn't you get the total?
A person can apply the four opponent or antidotal powers to that through confession. So the most important of these four, though, would be the power of repudiation, in which you see the faults of acting in that way. I mean, you appreciate why this is a negative thing to do, and you know the drawbacks of behaving in this way, so you repudiate the act. And the power of resolve, where you make a firm commitment that from now on I'm not going to act like that anymore. So the power of repudiation and the power of resolve. You add to that then a certain antidote or remedy. Maybe you meditate on emptiness, or cultivate loving kindness or compassion, so the power of the antidote. And finally, the power of the support. You go for refuge. So that confessing with these four opponent powers present renders the seed of that non-virtue incapable of producing the unpleasant effect.
Understand?
Let's say that you have a seed, like a wheat a seed from a wheat plant, or just seed from any type of plant or tree. If you were to put that and boil it up in water, then the kernel, this husk might stay. The kernel might remain, but it no longer has the ability to produce a sprout or a plant, right? I mean, its ability to produce the plant has been destroyed.
Understand? Well, kunchi geta jaws at that.
This is similar to what happens with when anger destroys the roots of virtue, and confession destroys negativities. These things render the respective seeds incapable of producing their effects.
Understand? What those
So it's in this light that we can see how anger is bad. Yeah? Why impatience is bad. So we need to practice patience. This is the second reason to practice patience. We need to think more about these two reasons and be quite certain about them. If you were to think more and more about it, actually, you'd find that there are other reasons to practice patience as well. This is just simply two. And Geshe is just introducing us to the topics. We need to go away and think about them more and more. Think about the reasons underlying our conclusions, why we do the things we do, and so forth. And more and more will occur to you.
Understand? The reason or Zeva said, Anita, Zeva Ketchambo, Tandating Najala German Yubizeva, had never Ketchambore. The reason Mando Ditulia, Condiche Resumba, Mando Shenju de Chitarua. Shenju
Check us.
Zevino Chio. Or Shenju no Suya. Soon never Chena. Pandese machine, Nichi, you two Revesana, Kona Lawa Maibi, you didn't know your Yamai, Kondi Chana, the more Chuchuni. Sitting about Lasuna, Patsing about Tile Malaba. So sing in it. Touch it, a to dinner, and you man, Chambo Lion. See, the winner, but there were Chambo Jessonayo, and Panda Lemajaba, living your chest of a child with the essence.
Patience. The patience that does not think to harm doers or act against them. We really need to do this. Geshe taught on Shantideva's text, Way of the Bodhisattva. At least he taught on a lot of it. He taught on that section on patience as well. And in there, you might ask yourself that, am I capable of not feeling ill will towards somebody who harms me? Well, Shantideva says that there's nothing that doesn't get easier with familiarity. So you start with something small. Someone saying something offensive but relatively minor to you. And you work on that, not feeling ill will towards the person who says this offensive thing to you. And you slowly build up till eventually you don't feel ill will even when someone says something very offensive to you. You can build up your ability like this because there's nothing that doesn't get easier with familiarity. So you can indeed do this. It's important, developing this facility, or this ability.
Understand? Then Tachata was also Tachata. Tachata is the Galia, also part Kechi Jabna, and Charles, then Charles, Jenda Ayamishi, Yashada, and two Karla, Suchi Lion. So the Palan is Titaya, so the Gamusho Matukudo Sagamara.
Sagamara.
Shivaji Lavina, Shiva shows Lavina, Shiva shows Shivaji Live. 먼저 군도 사고 말아.
사고 말아.
내가 무슨 또 그거래. 내가 수요.
We're taught to think about the things other people, the negative things or nasty things other people say to us as being like echoes. Right? Thinking of it as like an echo. Right? So in Tibet, the only place you get an echo is when you're standing in kind of a canyon with a big rock wall or something like that, right? So you if you sit there in a canyon with a big rock wall and you were to shout out something really nasty, the sound bounces back, right? But it only makes you laugh. You don't get angry, do you? Now, you could sit there and say something really as nasty as you want to. I mean, you could say, "I wish you'd die," and then when it bounces back, it's just an echo. You don't get angry at it, right? So we think of the other nasty and offensive things other people might say to us as just being like an echo. You don't get angry at it. And they say that it's just the same, isn't it?
Not same. Not same, but
it's not the same, but you can think of it as being the same. Yeah.
아니 야 만도 제비뇰레 사야지. 야 카셰는 소는 놀라. 야, 다 제비뇰레 야 보지 쟤나? 아니 가리나 주장적이네. 얘다 도서마에 얘다세. 아니 들리지는 대구에서 레삼네. 대dem. 내 눈도 찌래. 내세 마셔라요. 좋아. 내세 마셔라요. 정말 이제 말아봐 지스요. 마도. 카셰 제초야.
There's more that we should say about this bodhisattva practice. Some people are concerned that if they are always practicing patience, then they're always going to have to, come out the loser. That they're always going to be they never stand to gain, only to lose. They think that if you practice patience, that means that if another person lashes out a beating or something, that you just have to sit there and take it. You curl up or something like this. But that isn't necessarily the case. Right? In practicing patience, then, we're taught not to respond with ill will. Yeah? We're taught not to lose our loving kindness and compassion. If so long as you don't lose your loving kindness or your compassion, then you can try different things. There's a range of things that are available for you to do, so long as you're not acting out of ill will. For instance, responding in a way that doesn't harm either yourself or another. There are indeed things that you can do to deal with the situation.
Okay.
The worst thing would be to lose your compassion. Once you lose your compassion, you're bound to get angry, and then you quite likely will do a very serious negativity and something non-virtuous.
Understand?
Having discussed this, the patience that does not think to harm doers, and we've got the second type of patience, the patience that accepts suffering, which is also very important.
Understand? Also, Tangi, Jenji Susole never chenny. Susole Dumache Suna. That's it. Passion Naja Chimunyo Bizarro Chibanda. Di Jenji Susolia, Tsering Yabandola, Duchachi, Lamne, Susole Selia, Dumachi, La Yugunduna. That's it. Two the languages. Carlson, Susu Pa, Yaman, call a pan never cheppy. Only teen job the two, La Yugoyita, that's what's in here. Hako Yobaita, Jenny, Palmagena, and you must call you Maria Sunday. Only Dumati Tunda languages.
In this type of situation, we can see how this second type of patience very closely, it's closely linked to the first type of patience. So let's say another person does something harmful towards us, and it makes us suffer, right? Well, we don't feel ill will towards the harm doer. Rather, we recognize that this is basically my own actions coming back upon me. That in the past I've harmed another person, and now this is the effect of having done that. It's coming back on me. So rather than get angry and wish to harm the harm doer, yeah, we recognize why we're suffering and we accept that suffering. And so we accept the suffering that comes when another person harms us. So can you see how the suffering of accepting, the patience of accepting suffering is quite the same as the patience of not harming the harm doer?
Yeah.
Not thinking of harming the harm doer? Poems. Sometimes our health will, go off. Maybe we don't look after our health properly, or we get sick, something like this. And there's suffering associated with that, right? Well, also accepting suffering in those circumstances. This is also a way to practice the patience of accepting suffering. Suffering is an effect or a result. And as an effect, it necessarily has a substantial cause. There must be a substantial cause for suffering.
Understand?
Do we understand this term, substantial cause? Does that make sense? For instance, in order to make a wooden table, you must have the substantial cause of wood, right? So you're talking about a cause of a similar or compatible type.
Understand, isn't it?
Yeah. Metal cannot make or be turned into a wooden table, can it? Yeah, excuse me. Metal cannot be the substantial cause for a wooden table.
Substantial cause. Okay. Similar. Maruso achi kala tata manji bada. Ani maruso chi chete manji ba. Rawa chi nimitsi tabada. Ani achi tidigo. Do duna nazan damra le yoga tes. Nyele chi jo kala de mare. Nyele chi jo nimitsi bade mare. Nyele chi jo tidigo duma nyoya
Maybe something's not right with our diet, so our health suffers. Maybe we spend too long in the sun, something we get sick. And yeah. So the suffering that ensues from that must have a substantial cause. So the food in your diet is not the substantial cause. Yeah. The hot sun is not the substantial cause. The substantial cause for your experience is a seed within your own continuum.
Understand?
That seed in your continuum comes to fruition. So you experience that. The food or the way the health, the way you take care of your health, these are conditions for the fruit, for these seeds coming to fruition, but not the substantial causes.
Understand? Choro gardinolia, ani mango saben da wuji ta men, choro chilu salu kaze jenaya, debshel marwa.
If you don't plant a seed for a mango tree in your garden, doesn't matter how much water you pour onto the ground, how much earth you give, or fertilizer you have around it, no mango tree is going to grow there, will it?
No.
Assuming there was no seed there to begin with. Why is that? Because there's no substantial cause for it, isn't it? That's why.
Understand? Then you manzo tandu yoar, nyamu pansambi. Roba, Duma Ponsambi, Jachomba Sandoda, Sanjay Sando, Roba, what to do, Chesela, Kazin never chena, Kazin Chete Manjinayo, Kalichanayo, Korusu Naya Yamare. Kalisan, Korusu and Yeliji Jayamar. Yeliji Japan Savai, the Tegre, but then I'm Kunja.
consider a type of being who's already abandoned all afflictions, all suffering. Like, for instance, an arhat or a Buddha. It doesn't matter how much another person tries to harm them. It doesn't matter how. So we fail to purify that seed through confession. But as it comes to fruition, it can be exhausted. So seeds can be exhausted through coming to fruition.
Understand?
So we have these substantial causes, which act as the cause for suffering, and they will come to fruition, and hence the suffering occurs. So whether it's a headache that we suffer from, or say some type of physical illness related to diet or related to health, whatever it is, and what you have a substantial cause in your continuum that comes to fruition and and hence the suffering.
This habit
the fact that we experience these things is a sign that we haven't been able to purify that seed, like Geshe was explaining earlier.
Okay.
When we get sick or suffer in these ways, it's a sign that we have a seed that we haven't yet purified. So we fail to purify that seed through confession. But as it comes to fruition, it can be exhausted. So seeds can be exhausted through coming to fruition.
Understand?
If we understand this state of affairs, we won't find our experience of suffering intolerable. Because, for instance, we'll understand that I was the one that created the karma in the first place. That I was unable to purify the seed through confession. So now the seed is simply coming to fruition. So knowing where it comes from and why it remains and how it's happening helps us not to become impatient with that experience. It's no longer intolerable. So the mind is a little bit more at ease, or more relaxed. We can also use this to develop our loving kindness and compassion. We think about how I was the one that performed the action in the first place. I was unable to purify this through confession. So now this seed has come to fruition. So now I'm experiencing whatever this illness or this difficult circumstance is. And think about all the other people, all the other sentient beings, who how many who are undergoing such a thing or have a seed to undergo this type of illness. How many beings potentially at any given time have a particular illness or the seed for such a thing? So you think that may my experience of this illness be enough so that they do not have to experience it. You make this type of aspirational prayer, and and in doing so, adopting that type of attitude. So think about how adopting that attitude would increase your loving kindness and compassion.
Okay? That's what to say.
You think you could you think like this?
Manana so to say.
If you're not sick, you can think like this.
Nothing. Forget about it.
Once you get sick, you forget, though, maybe. Yeah. Which is why Geshe thinks that we need to kind of get used to this way of thinking before we're sick. Yeah? As if we can train our minds to think like this beforehand. No matter what type of suffering it is, whether it's suffering that's related to an illness, it's mental, it's physical, whatever suffering it is, it's only exacerbated by our finding that intolerable and being impatient with it, right? As if we, so long as we think, as long as we find that experience intolerable, the suffering only gets worse. It doesn't get any better. Whereas if we can accept the suffering and adopt these attitudes, then the suffering is much lighter. It's not as bad.
Understand? Or those genita, Hashina Hutoni, Tamando, Hele, the Zote, Shibache, Lozang. Only those gone. Those Chevaina, one inch in Nasona, then it was Yadav child. Mando, Nadi but the good dinner. Then Mando, the Pekin Tawachila, you are the Tangi Lagame, Gasso, Kupi, Gasso, Petoparisha, at the Mila Pejagame, Maso, then it good dinner, then it cannot tell you.
We need to train ourselves in these attitudes. Learn about them, train in them, become familiar with them beforehand. So that when we end up sick or facing some type of problem, then we're able to apply them. Oh, there's an analogy, but Geshe's not going to say it because it's a dirty analogy. But anyway, it's but there are analogies to illustrate his point. So the point, though, is that we need to prepare ourselves for it, to become accustomed to it before the actual event. Accepting suffering. This is something that's easy to talk about, but difficult to put into practice. Of course, it's difficult. We as listeners find it difficult to put into practice. And Geshe says even he is the one who's teaching it, talking about it. He finds it difficult as well. But it's definitely something we must know, something we must try to apply.
Okay.
To begin with, we must understand the state of affairs. To start with, try to develop your understanding. And then try to apply it as much as you're able. We all know how many problems in our lives are caused because of our misunderstanding or our lack of knowing, right? So first gaining that understanding is important.
Okay? Well, then,
Oh, 인지래. Next we have joyous effort. Joyous effort is important for all virtues, just like meditative stabilization and wisdom. Time's up. So it's important for all virtues, all three of them, and maybe in the future, if we get an opportunity, we'll speak about them at greater length. I mean, in all seriousness, they are very important. Joyous effort, meditative stabilization, and wisdom. But since time's up, maybe we'll leave it there.
Understand? Mazu tendi saya de kale rekana dodna tendi gela togo. Mazu tanda nyole tuzu kanga gyo chanja ke shege yore. Tunzu ji nyole chaya ya gabo cha de tendi. Mato uzu jaya de mare.
Joyous effort is described as the delight that you take in virtuous activity, right? So it's enjoying doing virtuous things. That's joyous effort. That's joyous effort, not just pushing, yeah? Just pushing or persevering is not joyous effort.
Well, pushing dangerous. Yeah,
that's Geshe's English for nausea. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, pushing makes you nauseous, right? We need a sense of delight. Yeah, we need to enjoy cultivating loving kindness and compassion and patience and these other things. So we need to recognize that that there are good qualities that come from doing these things, so understanding what comes of this, and simply to enjoy the act of. So we need, of course, also in joyous effort, just taking things small but continuously. Yeah? So amount that you can manage, but sustained over a long period of time. These are very important for sustaining joyous effort.
Okay? What does it? Then you remember what does it? And then you think, then you have some chai. So you let so carry, Sana. So, Janda, so you let so carry Chilio, Sana. Somebody in your Chilio. Think we need to allow. Somebody in your chat, okay,
this is Geshe-la's opinion in any case. If someone, we must know what our main practice is. So if someone were to come along and ask you, what is your main practice? What is your emphasis anyway? We ought to be able to say loving kindness and compassion. And this is most important, for our main practice is to be loving kindness and compassion. All these other practices are meant to help us develop these, to improve these. So some can act as causes for it. Others perform carry out the different duties by performing certain functions. Some are effects of those. Some are branch supports. Yeah, but they all link back to loving kindness and compassion.
Understand? Hana. Oh, gee, so,
some of you might recite mantras, do prostrations, offer mandalas. I mean, after all, many of us have adopted the Tibetan tradition, so maybe we, do some of these things. Perhaps some of you, probably make aspirational prayers, right? There's people who recite mantras, right? Well, these, you must make sure, that these feed back into the development of loving kindness and compassion. Okay. It's possible that they don't, right? So we must make sure that they're linked into these things.
Understand?
If we're reciting mantras, doing prostrations, making aspirational prayers, and we're only getting angrier, something's gone wrong. In that case, it's probably better that we just curl up and go to sleep. So that's the the state of affairs, and Geshe says thank you, and maybe we'll leave it there for tonight. Are there any questions? Yeah.
Sometimes a little anger may be good, I think. For example, when it motivates you to act on behalf of the oppressed. So what's your view on that?
Sometimes anger is a little good. For instance, when it motivates you to act for the oppressed. Sometimes no, it's not good. What is the nature of anger? What?
No.
No. What is the nature of anger? I guess I was just talking about this. You didn't listen, did you?
Yeah,
No, he's honest. Do you understand what the nature of anger is?
Well,
not to listen to you.
the reason I raised the question is
No.
that's what you said, a little anger may be good.
What exactly did His Holiness say?
You just said that a little anger may be good.
A little anger may be good.
But he didn't elaborate.
Yarmuche 1959 all Chinese teaching people. That's a maraba. There we are George Kashif. So what ya Jamila Kurosaki to guess? George we are. Could this language? Ina couldn't change your mess. Tagara, Democrat, and the Pechivio.
In 1959, His Holiness was effectively kicked out of Tibet. He could no longer stay there. And people have asked him along the way. So, people have asked His Holiness along the way. In fact, very recently, when he came to Australia, are you perhaps a little bit angry with the Chinese? And His Holiness says, from time to time, I get a little bit angry, but I never allow that anger to continue. As soon as it arises, I try and stop it. In fact, this is on the CD from the visit. That's where you heard it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Is that where you got it? His Holiness saying that he gets from time to time he gets a little bit angry is not His Holiness saying that that anger is good. Anger, even in small amounts, involves ill will, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which is the opposite of altruism and goodwill, right? Goodwill is virtuous, isn't it? ill will is non-virtuous.
Listen.
If it's non-virtuous, it's necessarily bad, isn't it?
That's it. Okay? Or teacher.
The Quran does this because the koa chegi ore sa koa yimbachane then yapore segitu.
What?
Perhaps it's just a definition of what gives me dissatisfaction, strong dissatisfaction versus anger. I like to think of anger as a thermometer. Let's say 1%. If I catch anger at 1, I've stopped it from being anger. And dissatisfaction can be a motivation.
So maybe
whereas if it gets to 5, it's danger, and when it gets to 10, it's an action or a reaction.
So maybe it's about definition, like not distinguishing between dissatisfaction and anger. So like you like to think of anger in terms of a thermometer. So like if it only gets to 1, then it hasn't really become anger. Gets to 5, it's dangerous, and gets to 10, it's acted upon or it becomes a reaction. Control Michelle, then Yawa Michelle, then Chipa Labdegio, you said Sangidusa. Satan Tayachi Yorwa, Marbochi, Chumabochi Yorwa, Satan Tayachi Yorwa. Then a Tambo, Niposumbo Shiba Nava, then Yas, Chubas Parluchi Yadrovina. They Tambo de Levina, then he Yimi de said, then he go to Vina. Then he Control said, should I get to your Maresa? Kagayores, Control Majucona. Then in Navas de Levina, Penny Yangachi, or Chubas de Levina, then he Control Sheba Mase, Control de Lugan Nagitoli and Gileongres. Jan has done some good study, hasn't he? According to Shantideva, we must distinguish between displeasure and anger.
Understand?
Displeasure can be beneficial for us. For instance, it can help us to develop the determination to be free. But that's not ill will. That's not proper anger. It's like a cause for anger. As far as mantra goes, you might find teachings on taking aggression onto the path, but this is a different subject entirely. This is mantra. In mantra, you can talk about taking attachment onto the path, taking aggression onto the path. But, this is for something that happens in mantra, and in particular for people with a high level of realization. So this is a different situation. There is indeed a point that you must reach before you can do these things. And in the text, Wheel of Sharp Weapons, it gives a similar analogy. It talks about how a peacock can feed on poison, and its plumage only becomes more and more beautiful, right? Whereas if a crow or something were to come along and eat the poison, it would die. So something like this.
Be careful. Okay? 그쪽 때에서 다 같이 아니 소소 계속 저안 되면 계속 해야
So you reckon oh, okay, a little bit of anger is good. You get a little bit angry, you end up destroying your roots of virtue. Yeah, you don't do any good for yourself. So.
I just check. 아니
Brian, yeah, do you have?
Is loving kindness or compassion the ultimate expression or the ultimate result of perfecting wisdom?
Is loving kindness or compassion, are loving kindness or compassion the ultimate expressions of perfect wisdom? Jamba tang ninje se denso sherik karasa tachimbe debu de besa pena konse de debu tatu dende de besa. Loving kindness and compassion. Koran pechi siktentu pechi tandandelen cabbages. So, if I use the words ultimate in here, they have it has a very specific connotation. Yeah. So, like I use that, I did that, but what that implies in this sense is, having developed something to its utmost extent, which in turn, which in other words is Buddhahood. But actually, loving kindness and compassion must must be present along the way, so that we can reach that point. So I said, perhaps it's just a matter of language. If you say rather than ultimate expression or perfect wisdom, you talk about our loving kindness and compassion and expressions of pure wisdom or good wisdom. Is this kind of what you're getting at, or do you really want to use those words?
Speak in terms of loving kindness as being the main practice, and all the other things as a support for that. But I'd always thought that wisdom and compassion should go along like that. And I've read that the Buddha taught all his teachings for the sake of wisdom. So I was wondering then, if one develops perfect wisdom, is that naturally express itself as compassion when you get to that point?
Dela nyamnan so de jambata ninje res de mambo sumbaresa.
Yeah.
Te nyama Quran di nangbechi dedens lo ne sangi shaga tibegi dene cause ninje tan sherap ni Quran se pena ja shopa ni dabuchi res niga gogres.
Yeah.
Ani de ma imba yang Quran se pachin tamonga den se pachin dupa de shebe chetu then yaman cheyares then dabuchi chi sungeyores. Yeah, Geshe would agree with these statements, about needing both wisdom and compassion, and also how other teachings are meant to, for the development of, for instance, the first 5 perfections are for the sake of developing the 6th perfection, etc. Geshe believes he might even have said that when he taught on this 3 principal aspects of the path. Because shirab yang tapachi sheba shirab yang tapachi de shene jambatang ninja halam Quran because ranshingi de le ungruasa shirab yang tapayana. Why would loving kindness and compassion be expressions of perfect wisdom?
Remove all ignorance.
Because 니제 전부다 전부 전주지 생년에 전에 요 말이야. wisdom 요다 봐요. 운이 또 싫어요.
For instance, the Hinayana practitioners can have perfect wisdom. They can have realization of emptiness. So but that they don't necessarily get these other things. Just a moment. They will not have great loving kindness or great compassion. Quran dus peji shera yan tapa mashe kon la jambating Quran shera ta chimba yimbe geje insare. Kansene. Ore. 말해. 이네 때네 그 화보지 갸네. 마리파 강가 폰사네스. So the word perfect is different from the word ultimate, in at least in the terms of this translations. But when you talk, perfect, you can have perfect wisdom before you abandon all ignorance. But you were talking about having perfect wisdom only after you have abandoned ignorance. But I think the point is what you're saying is not so much you can't have loving kindness and compassion before you perfect wisdom, but rather once you've perfected wisdom, wouldn't that loving kindness and compassion be expression?
We have
mingling to
compassion and wisdom, realize the emptiness, isn't it? And begin first realize the emptiness, wisdom, and condition. Continue and meditation, and it become perfect. Similarly, compassion. First beginning compassion, and then continue develop and perfect, become perfect. Wisdom, compassion, and then in power, isn't it? Like this. Therefore, each help.
It happens in stages, right? Where you develop some wisdom, some compassion, some ability, and you work to develop each of these along the way. So they're mutually supportive of one another.
Understand? We wisdom not explained now. Therefore, we normally practice meaning. So
Main
practice and compassion and love kindness. This important. Other all this like branch or
right.
Yeah. And of course wisdom, emptiness, without emptiness, wisdom important. But
doesn't necessarily,
not yet explained.
And also, as Geshe says, it doesn't necessarily lead to great loving kindness and great compassion, as in the case with Hinayana practitioners.
Yeah. Okay? Thank you.